You're joining us for part 2 of our Enneagram series, where we're doing a series of webinars really just focusing on the family. Today, we're going to be talking about the Enneagram and how it can influence parenting styles. Our webinar last week, we gave a general overview of the of the Enneagram, and if you missed it, you can find it on our website, on our YouTube channel. It was really, really good content. I'm excited to have my friend and Enneagram coach with us, Shannon Anderson, for part 2.
Hi, everyone.
Can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, Shannon?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my name is Shannon Anderson. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, actually a suburb of Atlanta, a smaller town called Smyrna. And I am a certified Enneagram coach. I have been since 2018. I'm also a wife and a mom of 3 littles. My oldest is 5. My daughter's 5. My son is 3.5. And my baby, he will be 1 on Friday. This is a topic that I'm very, very excited about because I'm in the thick of parenting, in the little years of parenting toddlers, babies, and elementary age children. And so I myself feel like I have a lot to learn and grow in this area, but I really, really feel strongly that the best thing that you can do as a parent is give your child a mom or a dad that is self-aware. So happy to be here. Thank you, Jenny, for inviting me back.
Yes, I'm so excited. I know today we're focusing on the Enneagram and parenting styles, but for anyone who may have missed the first webinar that we did, could you just give us a brief overview of what the Enneagram is?
Absolutely. I'm going to go to my next slide here. So you'll see this is the diagram of the Enneagram. And Ennea simply means 9, and there are 9 types or 9 numbers on this map. And gram just means diagram, but I've heard it described simply as an internal GPS for personal development and self-awareness. As you can see at the very top, there is type 9, we have the peaceful mediator, and then 1 is the moral perfectionist, type 2 is the supportive advisor, type 3 is the successful achiever, type 4 is the romantic individualist, type 5 is the investigative thinker, 6 the loyal guardian, 7 the entertaining optimist, and 8 is the protective challenger. Each of these types has core motivations, a core fear, a core desire, a core weakness, and a core longing. And that longing is the message that you long to hear as a child. Maybe you received this message spoken to you directly, or maybe you just interpreted this message even though it was never actually clearly said to you, but by your experience as a child. Something else to note is that we use our personality to protect us from these core fears and to achieve our core desires. So that's why they're called our motivations. We tend to interpret our child's life and development through the lens of our core motivations. So every number has a different core motivation. Therefore, think of it as a set of glasses that you put on and you're seeing the world in blue, but Jenny might be seeing the world in yellow. And so we're interpreting our children through the lens of our own personality and our own narrative and our own motivations.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because that seems to be the source of almost every disagreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in the heat of an argument and you're arguing about whatever the situation is. And then when you step away later, you can look back and understand that really it was just an issue of two people seeing one situation differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like the Enneagram gives us the tool to understand that, to kind of get ahead of the argument and understand that when you're in the midst of that, why you feel a certain way or why someone else feels a certain way. And it gives you so much more education, self-awareness.
Absolutely. It gives you awareness, but it also gives you empathy. Going back to what we spoke about a few weeks ago in regards to your marriage or in any relationship, really, if I can take off my glasses and put on yours, I can see the way that you are interpreting your child's behavior. Same for my spouse. My husband might see my daughter really upset and think she's upset because of what his core motivation is. But I see it through the lens of my own glasses. So I may interpret her being upset because she's feeling rejected from a friend. And so it really does give us language to communicate with our spouse about our children and their behaviors.
Well, I'm really excited about getting into all of the numbers and their core fears and desires and longings. I think that's going to be some really good content. One thing that I did forget to mention, if anyone has questions going through the webinar or anything that they just questions or comments, feel free to post at the bottom and we'll cover those. I'll try to read them throughout, but I will cover them at the end as well. So jumping into parenting, Shannon, my first question is, can I type my kids? Can I figure out, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old as well. Can I figure out what number they are?
Great question. I feel like once you learn about the Enneagram, the first thing you are tempted to do is start to type your child because you want to understand them, right? And that is highly, highly discouraged. I would say don't try and type your child. They are still growing, they are still developing, and it's really not until they become teenagers, maybe 14 and 15, when they're able to explain to you what their motivations behind their behavior is. So we can see our children's behavior from a very, very young age. You know, we can see that our 3-year-old is a rule follower, or we can see that our 5-year-old is fearless and seeks adventure. So we can see the behaviors, but behaviors are not what determines their type. Because two numbers might behave exactly the same, but have a completely different motivation. So to answer your question, no, don't try and type your child, but you can start to see some patterns and be aware of your children's behaviors and patterns, and maybe identify a few numbers that they might become. And when they get to an age where they can have that conversation with you, you can guide them through the Enneagram. And I highly, highly recommend it as a family with older children to have a conversation around the Enneagram to help your child identify what their number is.
That's great. We talked about last week about our own numbers and our spouse's numbers, ex-spouse's numbers, and understanding yourself and understanding others, and going back to what you said about having empathy for others. A question that I have is, do we project our numbers on our children?
Yes, we absolutely do. And if we're not careful and self-aware, we can unconsciously, and I say this without any shame or condemnation, I really want to be transparent with that message that we do things unconsciously. And so I don't want to shame anyone for their parenting styles. This is not about saying this is right and wrong, but to answer your question, yeah, we do. We parent from our own core motivations, and we can parent our children like as if they were us.
Right. And how many times have you heard someone say, I want my child to be a better version of me. I want to do better. But we forget so often that they're not us, that they're their own person. And so they're not going to be a better me or a better you. But it's so easy to fall into that because that's what I know. That's what I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So let's jump into the numbers.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we'll start with type 1, the moral perfectionist. These are accurate, diligent, responsible, and moral. Jenni, you said you identify as a type 1, and so it's a great launching pad to hear your perspective on this. The core fear of a 1 is being wrong, bad, evil, corrupt, or inappropriate. The core desires to have integrity, to be right, known as a good boy or a good girl. And the weakness here is resentment. And not ones tend to resent others because they feel like they're the only ones who have to be the responsible adults. When they were children, they really took on this role of adulthood early on. So they became the ones that see what's wrong with the world, and they're able to identify what's corrupt and to help improve it. So another word for a type 1, which I like better than perfectionist, is the improver. So my 1 friends or 1 moms and 1 dads, your strength is improving the world, identifying what's wrong and being able to help improve it.
And how would you see, I can think of a few examples in my life where I struggle, or at least I recognize this being part of my personality. And one of those examples is in schoolwork with my daughter. If she's learned something and I know that she knows it, I have an expectation that she should be right, that she should do it correctly, and that she shouldn't make a mistake. She shouldn't do a letter backwards if I know she knows how to do it forwards. And learning about the Enneagram and learning that that's my expectation, and to give her a little bit of grace has been released some of that pressure from me as a parent. Can you think of any other ways that a type 1 would parent, or understanding their type would be helpful in parenting?
Absolutely. One example comes to mind. And again, this is not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing, kind of like facts, numbers. To remove the our defense mechanisms, I have a friend who's married to a type 1, and she tells me all the time that her husband is very, very critical towards their kids and the way that they keep their rooms neat and tidy. And if their children don't pick up their rooms and put the clothes in the right spot, in the right drawer, he gets really, really frustrated and angry with them. And so she's constantly having to remind them, by the way, they're only 3 and 5.
Yeah.
So it's like, ones might forget, oh, they're still just children. They're not little adults. When you are placing your high expectations on your children, there isn't a lot of mercy and grace for error, like you mentioned, with schoolwork. And so when you own your own story, when you own your own core fear, your own core desire, and you have become aware that this is your core fear and this is your core desire and this is one of your weaknesses, you're able to step back, be more forgiving toward yourself, give yourself more mercy and grace, and that should spill out onto how you see your children.
I laugh because I have a little bit of a funny story. We bought my daughter a dollhouse, and the dollhouse comes with all of these pieces and rooms. And
Yeah.
first few weeks, I helped her put it together, and I would go in there and reorganize the dollhouse and how the couch is supposed to be in the living room, and everything is supposed to be in the right rooms. And I would go back in there, and she would have rearranged it or put it all in a bin and just had it on the floor. And I asked her, I'm like, isn't it more fun if everything is where it's supposed to go? And she's like, no, it's not more fun where it's supposed to go. But it took me realizing that for me, it is more fun where it's supposed to go in the right places. But to allow her to have that opportunity to, work her imagination and do it like she wants to. And it took me reorganizing it 4 or 5 times to realize, she's not going to put it in the exact same places that I want it to go or where the manual says it needs to go.
Right. That's an excellent example, Jenni. Excellent.
Ties back to that.
Yeah. And you will spin your wheels. You will go over and over, and you will keep catching yourself in this act, is what I like to call it in coaching, catching yourself in the act of trying to expect that your child sees the world the way that you see it,
mm-hmm.
a right or a wrong way to set up a dollhouse.
Yes, completely. Oh. And it's a daily struggle. So.
Mm-hmm. But it's freeing. I think there's so much freedom when you wake up to the way that you see the world and how you project it through your parenting. So let's move on to type 2. This is my number, the supportive advisor, the helpful, loving, warm, and nurturing parent. But our core fear is being worthless and needy, inconsequential, dispensable, and unworthy of love. Core desire is to be loved and wanted. And the core weakness is pride. And that's really shows itself in the form of an inability or unwillingness to acknowledge their own suffering and their own needs. So they focus on the needs of others, and then they insert themselves. So a message that I relate to and I heard as a child was, it's not okay to have your own needs. Therefore, you'll see a lot of type 2 parents completely pour themselves into the lives of their children, almost like a martyr, just disregard our own needs and our own desires to the benefit of our children. Self-sacrificial is how I would describe it. But we've heard the analogy when we get on an airplane, if the plane is going down, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can put it on your child. And that's what I would suggest to a type 2, is to take care of yourself first, and then you're going to be a better mother and a better father for your child. Another way that this comes out in a type 2 parent is we can smother our kids or worry if our children like us. And so if they're angry with us, it's like the worst thing ever, because it's playing into this fear that, you're dispensable or you're unworthy of love. And a type 2 parent would never want to feel like their children doesn't love them.
And has that understanding helped you since you're a type 2, as far as disciplining your child?
Yes, 100%. My daughter is a strong-willed blessing, and she came out just having her own opinion. And I remember as a newborn holding her and crying and saying to my husband, I just feel like she doesn't need me. I just feel like she doesn't need me. And he said, what do you mean? Of course she needs you. You're her mother. But I think I was playing into my own fear projecting that onto my child, that, you know, she's not going to need me because she has such an independent spirit about her. And she's still 5 years old, has such an independent spirit. She's never been the child that has cried when you drop her off at daycare or nursery, friend's house. She'll spend the night. She won't even miss me. She's the bye mom, see you in a few days, you know. And I would say early on in the first few years, it bothered me because I wanted to feel like she needed me. But that is a lie. That she does need me. I'm her mother, and I do believe that God picked me for her. And it has taught me a lesson that being needed by someone, my children, does not mean that I am loved or unloved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's so powerful because a common issue that we hear, you know, being a divorce attorney, is that, you know, people come in and they're talking about each person's parenting style, right? So this parent smothers the child and they'll never let them do anything themselves, and the other parent has these really high expectations of the child and expects things that they're not capable of doing. And to have an understanding of where that comes from, it's so powerful, because then you can start to understand the other person and understand yourself and why you feel this desire to not have your child be mad at you, or to not have, you know, on the flip side of that, of this expectation for your child to do something that they may not be capable of yet. So it's just so powerful to really understand yourself, but also understand others.
And I want to make a note here that this isn't an excuse, and I said it on the first webinar, is that this is not a sword or a shield. This is not this is the way that I am, and this is the way that I parent, and so you have to deal with it. Once you know your Enneagram number and you've identified it, that actually is empowerment to break free from your personality, because people will use it as an excuse. But now that I know this about myself, there is no excuse. It's still going to keep coming up in life. I'm still going to wrestle with this, but I now know that the purpose is to actually break free from the lie that I am worthless or inconsequential or unworthy of love. That's simply not true. I am worthy of love. And so you have to combat the fear once you understand what your fear is. I recognize that your behaviors are really just avoiding those fears, and your behaviors are really just trying to achieve that desire. So when I go out and buy my daughter something out of guilt because I disciplined her, it's really my desire. My desire is to be loved and wanted by her.
Right.
And I have to go against that sometimes, you know?
Right. But understanding it allows you to do that, educating yourself.
Right. It's freeing. It's empowering. It's been so helpful. I can't express enough to any parent listening to this webinar of owning your own story, owning your Enneagram type, knowing what your Enneagram type, and doing this deep growth work for yourself personally is going to help your children. It will. It just will. It'll help you, but it'll help your children, and it'll help your family. Let's move on. So type 3, the achiever. These are the successful, efficient, focused, and competent individuals. Their core fear is failing, being incompetent, inefficient, exposed, worthless, or unable to appear successful. Their core desire is to be valuable, admired, and respected. The core weakness is deceit. And that deceit often looks like them deceiving themselves into believing that they are only the image that they present to others. So, sorry, I didn't mean to skip ahead. So a longing of the type 3 is that you are loved and valued just for who you are, just for being yourself, not for doing, not for achieving. The type 3 individual, they heard or they received this message as a child. Maybe it was a parent who was really, really big on winning first place or winning the trophy or being on the honor roll or having all these accolades. And they heard that message from their parent that if they were not successful or competent, then they weren't valued or admired. So, if you project this onto your child, and again, not bad, not great, it's just a thing. It's not to shame you or condemn you, but if you're putting more value on the accolades or the success of your child, they might interpret that as they're not admired or valuable apart from what they do.
So could you see that in a parent as maybe someone who pushes their child to success in every aspect of their life? Would that be a good example of how we would see potentially the type 3 parenting?
Yes, and something else I have seen, or I should say observed from a type 3 parent, is that they're highly image conscious. So they want their children to be seen as the most well-behaved kids, the best dressed kids. I mean, God forbid they go out the house in pajamas or clothes that don't match. And I'll be honest, I wrestle with this. I have a high I have a 3 wing. We talked about wings in the last webinar. So I'm a 2 with a 3 wing. So being very image conscious, I do want my kids to be portrayed in a positive light. And so I've had to let some of that go. I had to just be okay with my daughter's hair being a mess or my son wanting to live in Spider-Man PJs all the time. But I do catch myself, and I do this with my husband. He will go out the house not matching, and he does not care what other people think about him. And I do. I care what people think about him because I believe that this lie that his image says something about me. Or same for my kids. The lie that I had to overcome was that my children are a reflection of me.
Right. So if they're throwing a fit in Target and, trying to jump out of the cart and you feel like someone is looking at you, the way you're perceiving
the worst. That's the worst feeling for me in the world. Like, it really is. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. In fact, I have a story. We were at Chick-fil-A. My daughter was maybe 2.5. And she did not want to leave the playground, and it was time to go. And I picked her up, and as I picked her up into my arms, she slapped me across the face, like so hard. And I sped out of that restaurant so fast, like threw her in the car, buckled her up, called my husband, and I was crying because I was so mortified. There were some other moms at her preschool that witnessed this happen, and I kept replaying the scenario over and over again, like, they must think that I'm a terrible mother, like I'm incompetent. I've been exposed, right? That I'm incompetent mother, because what kind of mother would let their child slap them in the face? And so I'm here to say to any mom or dad out there listening that, that's not true. That's a lie. The most perfect parent, which doesn't exist, by the way, is most likely to have a kid who throws a tantrum and maybe takes a swing at them.
And how could understanding your number and your wing help in that situation, as far as knowing that you are perceiving the situation in a certain way, but how could the Enneagram help?
Well, my desire to be respected and admired, especially in the realm of parenthood, I want other moms to see me in a light of, oh, she's a good mom, or I respect her because of the way that she disciplines her children, or I respect her because of the way that her children respond to her. When I fall into the trap, because it really is a trap, that the way that my kids respond to me has anything to do with my value, that's just not true. So I would say that understanding your number and even your wing really reveals to you the lies that you believe about yourself. And it'll help you renew your mind with the truth, which would be for a 3. Your child does not determine your value or your competence or your efficiency or how worthy you are. It doesn't determine that. And even the way that your children dress or the way that your children behave, we all want kids that behave well, but they're not always going to. Like, that's just the reality. They're human beings, and they are not us. Again, back to what we said earlier, we can't expect them to behave the way that we will behave, because they don't see the world the way we see the world.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, I think about type 3 and the situation. You've heard parents say, like, you don't act like that when people are around.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to image of you're presenting, you're putting the pressure to present a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and reality might be something different in other situations. And having the expectation of a child to be able to differentiate, mm-hmm. well, when is this okay and when is it not? Because people are around. That would be a lot on a child.
And some of our listeners today might begin to think, wow, my parent was probably a type 3, because they did not want to talk about our problems, our family problems. They didn't want anyone to know what was going on in the house. We just didn't talk about it. And that is a weakness of a type 3, being aware that because you want to portray this polished image, you might not be as willing to talk about the real issues in your life, in your family dynamics. So my suggestion to a type 3 is have humility. Because the reality is there's no such thing as a perfect parent. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage. This is a lie. But our culture is filled with type 3s. They're these high achieving, successful people. I know a few out there. We all have seen them on Instagram, and they have these huge platforms, but they don't talk about what's really going on. Rachel Hollis and Dave Hollis just announced that they're getting a divorce, and all of their followers are upset because they didn't let on what the problems were, and guess what? She has identified herself as a type 3 on the Enneagram on other podcasts. So it's no surprise. It's just, you have to be aware this is a weakness. You deceive yourself.
And you can learn.
You can learn from it, right? Let's move on to type 4. So, type 4 is the romantic individualist. These are deep, intellectual, emotional people. They long for beauty. They see beauty in the world. Their core fear is being inadequate, emotionally cut off, plain, mundane, defective, flawed, or without significance. Their core desire is to be unique, special, and your authentic self. The weakness is envy, and they feel that something is fundamentally missing from them, and envy leads them to think or believe that others have something that they lack. So type 4s, the message or the longing that they have are, you are seen and loved for exactly who you are. When I think of a type 4 parent, some of the strengths that I've observed are they can really hone in on their children's unique capabilities, and they celebrate that. So if they have more than one child, they're able to say, oh, my son is so different than my daughter, and really shine a light on that. And because to them, it's good to be unlike other people. It's good to be an individualist. They're excellent at sitting with their kids in emotional pain, any type of suffering. That's their strong suit, is to be able to sit in the suffering with their children.
This is a general Enneagram question,
Mm-hmm.
but are females or males generally one type or the other? So is a type 4 heavier female or heavier male, or not necessarily?
No, not necessarily. But one thing that I've read statistically is that there are less type 4s in the world.
Okay.
That there are more type 6s and less type 4s, which 4s love to hear, because that means that they're significant, because there's not a lot of type 4s out there in the world. When I think about 4s, I think about musicians, any type of artist. They're very, very creative. So they're great at teaching their kids to be creative, and they're great at just showing their kids that there is beauty in the world. So if you're walking down the street, you're a mom or a dad, and you're more likely to look down at the ground and see a flower blooming and point it out and say, look at that beautiful bright orange flower right there. They recognize beauty before any other types do. They're just more likely to see it. So when you parent from that lens, it's great, because your child is going to be more likely to recognize the little things and the beauty that's in the world. On the flip side, if you think or believe that there's something fundamentally missing from you, you're going to project that onto your child. You know, your kid might start picking up on the envy that you have in your heart. So it's really good to be aware that you might have some envy there, that you might believe that there's something missing from you, and renew your mind with the truth that you lack nothing. So you don't have to make up for it with these unique ideas and talents. God created you to be the person that you are. So it's just a good awareness tool for you to recognize that you actually are not defective. You are not flawed. You are very significant. So just being aware that that's your core fear and that's your core desire. We'll move on to type 5, the investigative thinker. These are intelligent, private, introspective, curious parents. Their core fear is intrusion by others, loss of energy, being incapable. Their core desire is to be capable and competent. Core weaknesses, the desire for gain or being greedy. When I say that they're greedy, they feel like they lack inner resources, and that too much interaction will lead to depletion. So they hoard their resources, they hoard their energy, they hoard their knowledge. Rather than sharing all this knowledge with the world, they keep it to themselves.
So how would you see this in a type 5 as far as parenting?
So, when I have a friend who became a mom and she's a 5, and she felt extremely incapable of her new role in motherhood. And let's just face it, children require a lot of energy from you, whether it be emotional and physical. They just do. They're energy suckers. That's what they are. And so as a type 5, I think you're at risk for having anxiety and depression, recognizing that you do have limits. They have the least amount of energy resource. So being able to recharge, if you're a mom or a dad, verbalizing that to your partner and saying like, okay, once the kids are in bed, I have to go and emotionally recharge. Or if you're working out of the home and you come home from work, the worst thing for a type 5 would be for your spouse to say, hey, I just invited 2 friends over and their kids for dinner, when they've been out of the house working all day long around people all day long. To come home to do that all over again would be just the worst feeling for them. So you can become really short with your kids because you're tired, you don't have a lot of energy. So really recharging your battery is key for a type 5. But also on the flip side, recognizing that you do need to be around people. You do need to be, we weren't created to be in this world alone. We're created to be in relationships. So 5s, because they're more introspective, putting yourself out there to be to your limits, engaging with other parents, engaging with other moms. My type 5 mom friend, she did not want to join our mom's small group. It took her 2 years, her daughter's 5. It took her 2 years to make a decision to join. And I kept asking and asking and asking, join our small group, join your small group, be in community with other moms. And she'd say, I'll think about it. I don't know. I just have to think about it. Finally, she joined this year, and she has said like it's really stretched her out of her comfort zone to share with other people. She has a lot of wisdom. She has a lot of knowledge to help other moms. But again, going back to that, hoarding their own wisdom and their own knowledge and not sharing it with the world. I think that that's a risk as a parent too for type 5, is like you can be a great teacher to your child because you are so intelligent. You have so much wisdom and you're so curious. So use that to your strength. Like show and teach your child all that you know.
Yeah, that's great.
5, okay, let's move on to type 6. The loyal guardian, and these are the parents who are always prepared, they're dedicated, they're dutiful, they're loyal. Their core fear is fear itself, being without support or guidance, being alone, blamed, targeted, or physically abandoned. Their core desire is to have security, guidance, and support. Their weakness is anxiety, and they constantly are scanning and preparing for worst case scenarios. The longing is you are safe and secure. That's their core longing. Safe and secure. So if you're a type 6 mom or dad and you long to hear that message that you are safe and secure, you're going to do everything in your capability to make your children feel safe and secure, which is a great thing. However, if you are a very anxious parent, you are constantly scanning the horizon for danger. So if you have a child that's 2 or 3 and they're climbing up the stairs on the playground, you might be more keen to say, oh my gosh, you're going to fall, or don't climb that ladder, or, this is not a bad thing again, but that anxiety gets projected onto our children. Whereas another number might be more laid back in their approach. And who knows, the child sees, oh, mommy or daddy, they're afraid that I might get hurt. So that child perhaps might not want to climb the monkey bars or go down the big slide because they're seeing mommy and daddy's reaction to them when they do it, as opposed to a reaction of like pure joy and delight when they take the risk.
It could be taken as a lack of confidence in your child. So if your kid is trying to do something or start something, it sounds like the type 6 may be likely to say, well, you could get hurt or you could fail, but to a child that might be perceived as, you don't have confidence in me. In reality, it's something that the 6 is struggling with in themselves.
Right. Well, because if I was a type 6 mom and my fear was that my child might be blamed or targeted or physically abandoned by their friends, I'm not going to be likely to encourage them to jump out and take a risk. Maybe it's become president of their student government in high school. Maybe it's, join the wrestling team or whatever their child wants to do in life. The type 6 might be a little bit more pessimistic, or I shouldn't say pessimistic, I should say realistic in laying out all of the worst case scenarios that could happen for that child.
Right. Well, it just seems that that's so powerful to know, because if I'm a type 6 and I'm laying out those worst case scenarios for my child, I think I'm helping them, right? I think I'm preparing them.
Yes.
But to that child, they might think, why can't you just think that this is going to go well? Why can't you just support me?
Mm-hmm.
Able to have that knowledge as a parent and be able to encourage your child and even still give them that information, but in a different context, could be so helpful.
Mm-hmm. And especially if your kid is the same number as you, that fear, you may be playing into their own fear of being without support or guidance. So the type 6 mom and the type 6 son, the mom is saying, oh, this could happen if you do this. And the son is saying, or feeling, maybe he's not even saying, he's feeling it, that I'm not getting support or guidance from my mom. Yeah. And so you have to, when your child can be your best teacher. I truly believe that. I believe that we are students of our children. They're teaching us what the way that we see the world, and using the tool of the Enneagram to do that. So recognizing, like, I'm projecting my own fear onto my kids.
Right.
Let's move on to 7. Type 7 is the Entertaining Optimist. They are creative, fun, playful, and inspirational. Now, I'm married to a 7 and had lots of conversations about this. The core fear is being deprived, trapped in emotional pain, limited, bored, missing out on something exciting. Their core desire is to be happy, satisfied, and content. The core weakness is gluttony, and they have this insatiable desire to fill themselves up with experiences and stimulation. in order to avoid pain, they pursue a list of positive experiences. So, how I've seen this play out in my husband's parenting is he will plan a vacation for us and plan a ton of experiences, whether it be go on, everything is an adventure, which is great because he'll call it driving to the store to get ice cream is an adventure. You know, going through the drive-through to buy a donut in the morning is an adventure. That's the language that he uses. He'll say, we're going to go on an adventure, really just going through Dunkin' Donuts drive-through, but it's an adventure, which is so fun and playful for small children, and I can appreciate it. However, when our kids are in emotional pain, especially with my 5-year-old daughter, she's crying because she feels left out from a group of friends, or she wants something that her brother has. As a type 2, I'm able to sit with her in that emotional pain and be a little bit more compassionate and say, I understand how you feel, that you don't feel loved by your friends right now. Whereas Eric will just spin it to a positive, and as she gets older, I can see to her, and I'm projecting, I don't know, but I have told him this, it can come out as if you're disregarding her emotional pain because you don't want to sit in that emotional pain. And so a growth area for 7 is to be okay with sitting in emotional pain, because reality is life is not always rainbows and butterflies. Life is not always playful. It is hard sometimes. And so we have to be able to address that. Same thing with the gluttony aspect of it. If we fill our calendar up with so many fun things, we might not be as present with our kids as we need to be. And I'm guilty of this. Type 2s and type 7s, we are aware that the one of the many things that we need to do is to recognize we need more time with our children than other people. Because other people are fun. Our friends are fun. We want to be surrounded by our friends. And sometimes our kids just aren't as fun. Sometimes our kids are hard and our kids are challenging for us. But we have to be able to be with them more than we are our friends.
Something that I think about it with the type 7 and the common fears and desires and weaknesses is when we have 2 clients and they're very different. And one is the fun parent, right? They never want to leave. They don't put their kids to bed at a certain time. They don't want to miss out on something. They don't want to stick to a schedule. And the parents have this fundamental difference of what's important, right? One parent thinks, no, we can stay out till 11 o'clock. What's the big deal? They were having fun. And the other parent sees a schedule and a structure, and it's this constant tension of one parent wanting to have fun and to not miss out and to give they're trying to give their child something as well. They're trying to give their child that experience and that excitement. And the other parent is trying to give their child the structure and the good night's sleep and the things that they need. And understanding that both of those desires come from the parents' core fear and core desire and core weakness could eliminate so much of that tension, because you would be able to put words to that scenario and explain beyond because they need to be in a schedule or because they need to have fun. You're not getting anywhere. You're just reiterating your position. And I see that a type 7, it's very easy to come up with that example because we see it over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I tell couples that are engaged to really use the Enneagram as a tool to know your partner before you're even married, because these core fears, core desire, weaknesses, they are going to reoccur. They're gonna pop up for the rest of their life. And people ask, what's the best couple? And I say to them, like, what's the best match number wise? All of them can work well together as long as they're healthy and growing. And as a parent, we need to be healthy parents, and we need to be growing parents. We need to have a growth mindset. Eric is aware that he can project this fear onto to our kids, or he can project, I see it in my 3-year-old. It's hilarious. My daughter will flip out because things didn't go according to the plan that we had. And my 3.5-year-old will say, well, sometimes things just don't go as planned, but it's okay. We'll do something else. And he can spin it, any negative thing, to a positive. And I look at my husband and I'll just laugh, because that's what he does. He will spin anything that is negative to a positive, and it's a great gift he has. But now our children are doing it as well, and it's just so funny because that's how he communicates with them.
Yeah.
One last story I'll say about my daughter. She is going to be repeating kindergarten, and I was so worried that she was going to feel rejected and feel unloved by her classmates because they're moving on to first grade and she's not. And having this conversation with my type 7 husband, I said to him, well, I'm worried she's going to feel unloved by her friends. And he said, she's not going to feel unloved. She's going to feel like confident, and like she's going to get more friends because she's going to have a whole new class of people. So she's going to have double the amount of friendships at the school. Just easily spins it to a positive thing, like an exciting thing for her. And it's a great perspective for me. So I can appreciate where he's coming from. And then I can recognize that my view of what my daughter's experience is going to be like is so limited. It's just limited by my own fear.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily that hasn't even happened yet. She might not feel unloved by her peers, but I'm worried that she's going to experience the fear that I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
For her. So. Type 8 is the protective challenger. And these are outspoken, direct, decisive, and compassionate individuals. And their core fear is being weak, powerless, harmed, controlled, manipulated, and at the mercy of injustice. Their core desire is to protect themselves, and this can deteriorate into a constant fighting or being in conflict. Their weakness is lust and excess. They have a need for intensity, control, self-extension, and a constant need to push and assert themselves willfully. So the type 8 parent, these can be very controlling parents, very demanding, high expectations of their children. I've seen it play out in a way of expecting their kid to not be as vulnerable, or to not cry over things, or to get over things really quickly. If their child falls down, I've seen a type 8 parent say, get up, you're good, because their core fear is being weak. They don't want their children to be weak. Mm-hmm. So the things that they hope for their child is that their kid would be strong, independent, resilient. Those are the kind of things that they push and project onto their children. Resilient, strong, confident. They want their children to be confident, in their decision making, because they're confident in their decision making. They don't skip a beat. When they want something, they do it. They usually don't ask other people for opinions. They just do it. They just do what they know to be true. And I see Jenni nodding her head because she's married to a type 8. So tell us more about that, Jenni.
I think just the main example I think of is the expectation of a child to listen and be controlled by that parent because they're in the position of power, right? Of you're going to do it because I'm your parent, period. And I don't need to explain anything to you. I don't need to tell you why. You just need to listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very direct, black and white type of parenting. And to be able to understand that why someone parents that way and what their fear and their desire is, and the ability to get to the same result in a different way is extremely helpful when you're married to a type 8 or you're co-parenting with a type 8 if you're not if you're separated or divorced, whatever the situation is, just understanding that desire and that fear, and to get to the same result of good behavior or of rules and of parameters, but maybe in explaining the reason behind that. My daughter is, she wants to understand how everything works. She wants to know why. And so that's a struggle of, well, why do I have to have a bedtime? And not just saying, because I'm your parent and you do, but explaining that she needs the sleep and why she needs the sleep. And just to get to that understanding relieves so much stress in the relationship.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the core longing for a type 8 is you will not be betrayed. So at some point, whether it was spoken or unspoken, the type 8 received the message that if they're vulnerable, then that can be used against them. And so they never want to be perceived as being the weak parent. Like you said, the weaker parent. And so there's a difference between being outspoken and being vulnerable. And vulnerability is important for your children. I would say a growth area for a type 8 parent is to show your child that you can be vulnerable. And now that takes personal work, right? You have to, again, own your story, own your core fear, own your core desire, own your weaknesses, and recognize that your child is not going to betray you. So if you're not, like, they're children, you know, they need to see a parent tell them a story about a time where, you know, you messed up or you made a decision and it didn't work out so well, and how you learned from that decision. That's vulnerability to a child.
Right.
They need to see you as a human and not as the supernatural, you know, outspoken, direct, decisive parent. Those are good qualities. On the flip side, they need to see you be compassionate, and that's why that word compassionate is under there, because that is a positive trait of the protective challenger. They have a ton of compassion for people. They really do. But they only show it with the people that they don't feel are going to betray them.
Right.
So if you're close to a type 8, you've seen this compassionate side of them. And so they have to be willing to show that to their kids.
Right. Definitely.
So I know we're running out of time, but I want to make sure we cover all 9 types. And the last but not least is the type 9, the peaceful mediator. And these are the good listener, the kind, the agreeable, the calm, and the steady parent. Their core fear is being in conflict, loveless, shut out, overlooked, or inharmonious. Their core desire is to have inner stability, peace of mind, and it can look like stubborn neglectfulness at times. The weakness is the sloth, and that term just means that they have a desire to be unaffected by life. It's an unwillingness to be fully awake to themselves. So type 9s can merge with any other number. They have this ability to see the world through all 9 lenses, which is very unique because, I mean, it gives them a great perspective. On the flip side, they don't know how to think for themselves, and that's very general. They have to learn to listen to their own voice because they're able to merge with all the other types and all of the other voices.
How would you see this in a parenting situation?
When it comes to a type 9 parent, they can just go along to get along with the other parent, especially if they're married to a type 8 who is more decisive and controlling. They're less likely to use their voice to speak up. If they are in a disagreement, like say the type 8 parent says, oh, our child is going to do baseball because I played baseball, even though the type 9, or let's use football, for example, football, because the type 8 played football, the type 9 might be worried that football could cause injuries, but they might not want to speak up and say how they really feel. And so this can lead to bitterness and resentment, which ultimately the emotional struggle of a type 9 is anger. That's a theme that keeps coming up in the type 8s, 9s, and 1s are in that anger triad. And anger is repressed because they're not voicing how they really feel. They're just going along to get along. And then years and years and years go by and till they can't hold it in anymore and they snap because they've been so angry for so many years, but they've never voiced how they really feel. So this unwillingness to be fully awake to themselves, that's what the sloth really means. It's like they are slow to recognize their own thoughts and their own emotions. They're asleep to it.
Well, I think
so the longing of go ahead, Jenny. I'm sorry.
I have a question. I think this has been so helpful in an overall view of all of the numbers and the fears and the desires and how we project those fears and desires on our children and how each of our numbers really does affect our parenting and the way that each parents, your child differently. But a question that I do have to wrap everything up is, are our children born a certain number, or is this learned behavior over time because of the way that we parent our children?
Yes and yes. Our environment, so yes to the first question, I do believe that we are born a number, but yes, the way that we parent our children and the life experiences that they have truly shape their numbers. And I am a testimony to this because I grew up with a parent who was very codependent on me. And so I received the message as a child that my needs are not as important as the needs of my parent. Therefore, my parent, who needed me to do things for them like read and write grocery lists and write checks for them and help them make decisions. I was constantly helping my mom as a child. Therefore, I became the helper, the supportive advisor. Now, I do believe that God gave me those strengths and is using it to my benefit in life. But the message that I received is that it's not okay to have my own needs, but my job is to help everyone else.
Right. That's just so important to know, is that the environment that we're creating for our children is shaping them and shaping how they are going to be as an adult. And so understanding the messages that we're delivering them, the why behind our behavior is so important and so valuable. Mm-hmm. And if anyone wants to get in contact with you, I know that you do some individual coaching. I believe that we have your link to your website on these slides. Do we have that at the end of this presentation?
I don't think it's added on here, but where would be the best place to share it, Jenni?
I can send that out and we will add it on the slide. Also, what is your Instagram page?
My Instagram is The Helpful Enneagram.
Okay.
And the website is www.thehelpfulenneagram.com.
Great. And they can find all the information on your coaching there.
Mm-hmm. And I do couples coaching. Whether you're married or divorced, I can still do couples coaching. I can do family coaching with teenage kids. And I can do individual coaching and help you grow and become more self-aware. I just love talking about this with you today, Jenni. Thank you so much. Thank you again for the privilege to speak a little bit about it in a broad view, and I'm happy to help anyone listening.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been extremely educational for me, and I just hope that it's helpful for anyone who takes the opportunity to listen and then connect even on a deeper level and invest in some coaching. So thank you, Shannon. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jenni. You too. Bye.